This is actually based on a true story. This family really exists, but the time is not during, post October 7th. This is pre-October 7th. But the Adani family is a family where a therapist was interviewing them post a traumatic experience of theirs. And so 10 children from the Adani family were living in the Gaza Strip, and they fled their neighborhood due to a military operation that was being conducted, obviously, by Israel. And these are some of the responses that they had, right, based on them having to experience that event, right? So we're talking about the active trauma that's going on, right? Not necessarily the transgenerational one, right? So they said things like, and these are children that were like 10 and under, right? So we're talking about like 6, 7, 10, 12, not teens, right? So they said things like, I feel my heart small and unable to talk, right? They were observed to have tears flowing. They had difficulty breathing, right? When someone is killed, when helicopters are there, when mines are planted, when houses are destroyed, when fields are razed or destroyed, razed to the ground, it's hard to, so that's when they experience difficulty breathing, right? It's hard for them to eat and to drink. They often find themselves shaking and they don't know why they're shaking, right? They tend to cry a lot and they find themselves having difficulty sleeping. So whenever a group oppresses, victimizes, brutalizes, or marginalizes another, many of the victimized people suffer trauma. And then they pass on trauma responses to their children as a result. Now that's a general quote, but I'm going to lay the case out, and inshallah later I'm going to come back to the healing portion of this, inshallah. So stay tuned for that. So, like I was saying before, right, in epigenetics, right, if we look at this group of children, which this is like the early 2000s, right? If we look at this group of children from the Adani family, right, their nervous system, and specifically the lizard brain part, the part that's responsible for the fight, flight, or freeze part, it's still developing, right? So as human beings, right, if we're in a car accident, the fight, flight, or freeze it's essential, right? When something is coming at us, that's what makes us flinch and dodge, right? Or when harm is in our way, that's what makes us fight to defend ourselves, right? Or to run away and escape the harm, right? So it's essential for us to have that, but children can be exposed to a traumatic event that is simply overwhelming for them. It's overwhelming for that fight, flight, or freeze response, right? And it's because it's still under development, right? And they're more easily overwhelmed than other people. And so and even there's even studies that speak to how a mother who's pregnant with their child that is releasing stress hormones, right, can have an effect on the fetus, right? So we are understanding, at least from this point, right, the early 2000s, that this is something that these children are experiencing, that they have to find ways to deal with their trauma so that it doesn't get passed on to the generation that follows.